Imagine waking up one morning, stepping out into your own backyard, only to find that a giant fence has suddenly appeared. Not just any fence, but one built by your own homeowners association, right across your land, your private space, your hard-earned property, suddenly cut off as if it never belonged to you. How would you feel? Angry? Shocked? Betrayed? Well, that's exactly what happened in this unbelievable story. And trust me, it only gets wilder from here. You see, this wasn't just a simple mistake. This was a full-blown battle between a homeowner and a powerful HOA that thought it could get away with anything. But what they didn't know was that their arrogance would one day meet the sheriff's bulldozer. And when it did, fences came crashing down, literally. The story begins with a man who had owned his land for years. Let's call him David. He bought his property with a dream, peace, privacy, and the freedom to enjoy every inch of land that he legally owned. But then came the HOA. At first, they seemed like a simple neighborhood group, the kind that collects dues and maintains flowers by the sidewalk. But slowly, they grew bolder. They started making rules, then enforcing fines, and eventually, they crossed a line no one expected. One morning, David noticed something strange. Loud noises, metal clanging, workers moving in and out of his yard. When he went outside to investigate, he was stunned. A fence was being built straight across his property line, not just a little over the boundary. No, this fence cut through his land like a sword slicing a map in half. "Excuse me, what are you doing?" David shouted at the workers. "Orders from the HOA." One of them replied flatly, "We're putting up a boundary fence." A boundary fence? Across his property? David couldn't believe what he was hearing. This wasn't a shared fence between neighbors. This was a wall that locked him out of parts of his own yard, the garden he planted, the shed he built, the land he paid taxes on. It felt like a robbery in broad daylight. David immediately demanded answers. He stormed into the HOA office, papers in hand, ready to prove his ownership. But instead of listening, the board members smirked. They claimed the land technically belonged to the HOA under their rules. They even waved around their own documents, trying to intimidate him. But David wasn't about to back down. He had his property deed, signed by the county, crystal clear about his boundaries. He told them, "This land is mine. You have no right to take it." The HOA didn't care. They doubled down, insisting that the fence was permanent, and worse. They threatened him with fines if he tried to remove it himself. Imagine that, being fined for trying to use your own land. This was no longer about a fence. This was about power. The HOA believed they could bully one homeowner into submission. They thought David would give up. But what they didn't realize was that he was ready for a fight. David began documenting everything. Photos, videos, every letter and notice the HOA sent. He collected witness statements from neighbors who saw the fence go up. He even went to the county records office to confirm, once again, that the land was his. Then came the legal battle. David filed complaints with the city, the county, and eventually, he reached out to the sheriff's department. At first, progress was slow. The HOA had lawyers, money, and a history of intimidating homeowners. But David had something stronger, the truth. Now, here's where the story takes a shocking turn. After weeks of back and forth, the sheriff's office decided to investigate. Deputies arrived at the property, walked the land, reviewed the deed, and studied the fence placement. And the verdict was clear. The HOA had trespassed. Not only had they built a fence illegally, but they had violated property rights. A serious offense. The sheriff told David, "You're right. This land belongs to you. That fence shouldn't be here." David felt vindicated, but the real justice was yet to come, because the sheriff didn't just make a note. He promised action. The following week, the HOA board held another meeting. They argued, shouted, and tried to stall. They even told the sheriff they wouldn't take the fence down unless ordered by a court. The arrogance was unbelievable. They truly thought they were above the law. But the sheriff wasn't playing games. He had authority, and he was ready to use it. So one bright morning, the sound of heavy machinery rolled into the neighborhood. The sheriff's office had brought in a bulldozer. That's right, not just a couple of deputies with tools. A full-blown bulldozer. Neighbors gathered around, whispering, pointing, pulling out their phones to record. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. And then, in a roar of diesel and steel, the bulldozer moved forward. Fence posts cracked, wood splintered. The wall that the HOA had built with arrogance came crashing down piece by piece. The ground shook as the bulldozer plowed through, leaving nothing but rubble. David watched with a mix of relief and triumph. The land was his again. Justice had finally been served. But more than that, this was a message to every HOA that thought it could abuse its power. A message that property rights matter. A message that sometimes the law is the final word. And it's backed by a bulldozer. Of course, the HOA tried to spin the story. They accused David of being difficult. They claimed they were just protecting the community. But the truth was out there for everyone to see. Videos of the bulldozer tearing down the fence spread across social media. People everywhere cheered for David, calling him a hero for standing up to injustice. And he wasn't just a hero for himself. His fight inspired other homeowners to question their HOAs, to demand accountability, and to remember that no board of neighbors has the right to steal what belongs to you. Closing with CTA for Section 1. Now, this is only half the story, because tearing down the fence wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The HOA wasn't done fighting, and David's battle was far from over. In the next part, we'll dive into what happened after the bulldozer left, the shocking revenge the HOA tried to pull, and how David turned the tables one last time. You'd think that after the sheriff's bulldozer crushed their illegal fence, the HOA would finally admit defeat. You'd think they'd apologize, learn their lesson, and move on. But no, this HOA wasn't done. In fact, what happened next proves just how far some HOAs will go when they feel their power slipping away. And trust me, it only made them look worse. Because instead of respecting the law, they decided to fight back with revenge. And once again, David had to decide, give up his peace or stand even stronger. After the fence came down, David thought life would return to normal. For the first time in months, he could walk freely across his land. No barriers, no stolen space. He finally felt at home again. Neighbors congratulated him. People online celebrated his victory. For a moment, it seemed like the nightmare was over. But the HOA board members were furious. To them, David's victory was humiliation. The whole neighborhood had watched their fence crumble under the sheriff's bulldozer, and now they looked weak. Weakness to them was unacceptable. So they began plotting, and their first move was paperwork. Within weeks, David began receiving letters in his mailbox, not from the sheriff, not from the county, but from the HOA. Thick envelopes stuffed with warnings, fines, and accusations. One letter claimed his grass was too tall. Another said his trash cans were visible from the street. Yet another accused him of improperly painting his shed, even though the shed was the same color it had been for years. Every little thing, no matter how small, became a weapon. The HOA was throwing fines at him like darts at a target, hoping one would stick. At first, David laughed it off. He knew these were desperate attempts to punish him. But soon, the fines added up. Hundreds of dollars. Then thousands. The HOA threatened to put a lien on his home if he didn't pay. It was harassment, plain and simple. Now here's the thing. Most people in David's position might have given in. They'd pay just to get the HOA off their back. But David wasn't like most people. He had already faced down their fence. He wasn't about to let a stack of papers scare him. So he fought back again, this time with strategy. David kept every letter. He took photos of his yard, his shed, his trash cans, proving that the HOA's claims were false. He showed that his grass was cut, his property was clean, and nothing violated any real rule. He contacted a lawyer, and together they built a case showing a clear pattern of retaliation. The lawyer explained something important. Retaliation by an HOA isn't just petty, it's illegal. And if they kept it up, they could face serious legal consequences. Meanwhile, word of the feud continued to spread online. Remember those videos of the bulldozer tearing down the fence? They went viral. People everywhere were still talking about it. And when David shared updates about the HOA's revenge, his story gained even more attention. Suddenly, It wasn't just one man versus an HOA. It became a movement, a fight that represented every homeowner who had ever been bullied by their neighborhood board. Strangers reached out, offering support, advice, even donations to his legal fund. The HOA, on the other hand, was drowning in bad publicity. Neighbors began questioning the board. Some even resigned, not wanting to be associated with such a mess. The walls around the HOA's power were crumbling, just like their fence had. But here's the twist. The HOA still didn't stop. They tried to hold a secret meeting, planning to pass new rules that would specifically target David. Rules about yard appearance, property maintenance, and even use of outdoor spaces. They thought that if they wrote new rules, they could trap him again. But David had eyes everywhere. Supportive neighbors tipped him off, and when the meeting happened, he showed up, armed with evidence, his lawyer, and a local news crew. That's right, he brought the media. The moment reporters walked in with cameras, the board members froze. Every word they spoke, every attempt at manipulation, was caught on film. They tried to spin it as protecting community standards, but the truth was obvious. They weren't protecting anyone. They were targeting one man out of spite, and the cameras captured it all. The story exploded. News outlets picked it up. Social media shared clips of HOA board members fumbling their excuses. Headlines read, HOA retaliates against homeowner after fence fiasco, and Sheriff Bulldozer hero faces HOA revenge. The HOA had officially lost control of the narrative. They weren't the protectors of the community anymore. They were the villains. And when public opinion turns against you that hard, even the toughest board can't survive. Soon after, the sheriff's office got involved again, not with bulldozers this time, but with investigations. The county launched an inquiry into the HOA's actions, reviewing their fines, rules, and meeting practices. What they found was shocking. The HOA had been bending rules for years, targeting certain homeowners while letting others slide. They had misused funds, ignored complaints, and abused their authority. David's case was just a spark that lit the fire, and now the whole HOA was under scrutiny. It all came to a breaking point at a special community meeting. This time, the room was packed. Neighbors who had once stayed silent stood up and demanded answers. Some shouted. Some cried. They were tired of being bullied. One by one, homeowners voted, and by the end of the night, the entire HOA board was dissolved. Gone. The same people who once believed they controlled everything were stripped of their power in a single evening. For David, the victory was more than personal. He hadn't just reclaimed his land. He hadn't just torn down a fence. He had helped free an entire neighborhood from a toxic system. His land was his again. His peace was restored. And his story became a lesson. No matter how powerful an HOA thinks it is, the law and the people are stronger. And here's the most powerful part. David didn't stop there. He began sharing his experience, speaking out for other homeowners facing similar battles. He became a voice for change, a reminder that no one has to accept injustice quietly. Because in the end, this story wasn't really about a fence. It was about standing up when someone tries to take what's yours. It was about courage, persistence, and the power of truth. So, what would you do if your HOA tried to steal your land? Would you stay silent? Or would you fight like David did? If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because one person's fight for justice can spark a movement, and you never know who might need the courage to pick up their own battle.